Hey guys, welcome to the Week 10 edition of Fantasy Football Weekly. I'm your host, Jonathan Kriegel. This week I've got wide receiver and defensive rankings. I want to talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers' recent hot streak. Also, I want to tell you 3 players to pick up and 3 players you might want to drop. First, let me get to the buys for Week 10. This week we have Houston, Indianapolis, Minnesota, New England, San Diego, and Washington all on buys, so adjust your lamps accordingly. Now, let's get into my wide receiver rankings. Yet again, at number 1, I have Antonio Brown of the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's been great all year. The last 2 weeks, he's been incredible. He scored 20 points the last 2 weeks, and I expect him to do great things yet again this week. He's back. Megatron, Calvin Johnson, is back on the field. He's a number 1 receiver when he's fully healthy, and I expect him to be in the top 5 week in and week out. He can make all the catches, and he's Matthew Stafford's favorite target. Be happy if you're a Calvin Johnson owner. Finally, he is back. Another wide receiver who has been very hot in the last 2 weeks has been Emmanuel Sanders of the Denver Broncos. He has become one of Peyton Manning's favorite targets. He scored over 100 yards the last 2 weeks, and he scored plenty of touchdowns. He is a great receiver to own because he's not a huge name, and you'd probably draft him a little later. Next up, I want to talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers and how fantastic they have been in the last 2 weeks. Ben Roethlisberger has been off the charts good. He's had over 862 yards passing and 12 touchdowns, an NFL record. And his biggest target has been Antonio Brown. Brown had over 277 receiving yards in the last 2 games, 3 touchdowns. I already talked about him before, but Martavis Bryant, I've yet to talk about, and he is worth adding in your leagues. He has had 5 touchdowns in his first 3 games. Last 2, he's had 4 of those, and he's been really hot to start his NFL career. If he is available in your leagues, pick him up right now. I'd say of the top 2 receivers, Marcus Wheaton has been their next best guy, but I don't think he's worth starting right now or even picking up. He might be an interesting name to look at, though, down the road if one of the top 2 receivers were to get injured. Now, here are my Week 10 defensive rankings. In fantasy football, the defensive rankings change all the time because usually it really all depends on who they're playing. And this week, a lot of these defenses have great matchup. First off, the Arizona Cardinals get to play the St. Louis Rams, who offensively aren't very good at all, besides one player who I'm going to tell you about a little later. Other than that, though, the Rams are pretty bad, and the Cardinals are pretty okay defense. Their pass rush has not been good, but the Rams really don't have any great wide receivers, so I don't really see that being a problem this week. Another interesting defense this year has been the Buffalo Bills. They have been in the top 5 in defensive points throughout the year. This week, they don't have a great matchup up against the Kansas City Chiefs, but they've been good enough where they are worth starting most weeks. And then at number 9, another team that's in the top 5 in defensive points, and that's the Miami Dolphins. This week they get to play Detroit, but they have been good enough this year where I think they might be a pretty okay start for this week. There's not many great defenses out there anyways, so if you need one, this might be a team you might want to pick up. The playoff push is upon us, and I want to tell you 3 players to pick up and 3 players to drop in order to be a champion in your league. Here are 3 players you might want to pick up in your league. Trey Mason and Bobby Rainey have both taken over the starting job in their respective cities. For Bobby Rainey, he took over Doug Martin's job, and Trey Mason took over for Zach Stacy. Both of them are worth adding if you're low on running backs or just want more depth. Then, Josh Gordon. Last year, he was a top 3 receiver. He's been suspended all this year. He's coming back in week 12, just in time for the playoffs. And if he is available in your leagues, pick him up right now. He might not be available because he is so good. You want to have him on your squad. And now, 3 wide receivers you might want to drop. Andre Johnson, he's getting old. He hasn't had over 100 yards all year. Just not worth owning. Percy Harvin has had 1 good game with the Jets since he's been traded. Wasn't very good with the Seahawks either. Also, not worth owning. And Wes Welker, he's just been bad all year. and Emmanuel Sanders has kind of taken over his job as the next big target for Peyton Manning. Sorry, Wes Welker owners, you might want to drop him. All right, that's going to sum up the Week 10 edition of Fantasy Football Weekly. Next week, I have the very popular flex rankings and tight end rankings. I want you to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you next week.